terms of social capital, we are extremely generous. I don't know where Sharon is, and I don't know how much money we distributed to charities through client accounts last year, but it was a lot. We are a very philanthropic society. And so in the U.S., we are the top of the large country categories. All right, but we do have concerns, right? So in a recent survey to say what is the most important issue facing the country right now, 50% of us responded unemployment and jobs, okay? 25% of us responded federal deficit and spending. 9% said healthcare. 7% said war. 5% said immigration, and the others said we don't have any problems. Well, let's take the first one, unemployment and jobs. Again, 50% of us say that is the most important issue facing the country right now, and I've got great news for you. It's cyclical. Right? The jobs will come back. The economic activity is there. The globe's going to grow at 4.4%. And so I pulled a chart on job openings, and as you can see, they're ticking higher. No, we're not back to where we were, but the good news is that time heals job wounds, right? So we will start creating jobs, and again, like I said, we had good numbers this morning. So the good news is this worry, 50%, is going to go away with time. What about the 25% worry? This one is structural. This one's a little stickier. And so what I've done is I've gone back and I've put government expenditures going back to 1980 against government receipts. Now you can see stage one, I will call in this process denial. Basically, we were running 3% deficits plus all through this period. We got a little giddy after the dot-com thing filled up the government coffers. And we were basically living in this complacency. Remember, Dick Cheney said, deficits don't matter. And then when we got into the period where we actually needed the government, we were also wildly spending. We went on an enormous spending spree for the last 10 years, and frankly, revenues did not catch up. And so we have been in this phase of denial marked by the quote, deficits do not matter. But then we got into the anger phase. Right? And we were in the anger phase specifically around the midterm elections. And so what I've got on the left here is a chart of, from the CBO, what the projection is for total government spending relative to total revenues. And you can see that these don't match up. And that created the Tea Party, right? It created a sweep in Congress. And in fact, if you poll Americans and you say, how much confidence do you have that the government can solve our problems? 31% said no confidence the government can solve our problems. And that led to the Republican barnstorming in the midterm elections trying to get us oriented around some fiscal discipline. And so now I think we're in this acceptance phase, okay? These two fine gentlemen, Pete Peterson and David Walker, are the ultimate private sector watchdogs on government spending activity. David Walker actually spoke in Memphis a few years back, was great with the Economic Club, but he's been the troubadour of fiscal responsibility. In fact, I put in front of you in your packets the State of the Union's Finances, which was their document that they put out that generated a lot of conversation. And so I'm going to take you briefly through that just to give you some of the proposals, because we can slay this dragon. And we are in this acceptance phase right now. So according to them, when you come to the 12% of the budget that's discretionary, some of the ideas that could fix it, let's go back to a pay-go structure. Okay, you're not for that? Well, how about some spending caps? We could go back to putting a debt to GDP ratio on the government. We were at 35% before the recession. We're now at 60%. We're headed off to 200% in the nether regions. And so how about just putting a cap on it and holding us accountable and making us make some cuts? In terms of the Defense Department, this is obviously a sticky issue. The reality is they just submitted a budget. It was bigger than any budget they'd ever submitted before. We need defense. I believe in that. The question is this the most effective and efficient allocation of government resources? Probably not. So there are efficiencies that could be gained in the Defense Department. What about Social Security? Did anybody in the room see the Chris Christie YouTube where he stands up and he says, all right, this is a risk. I'm a politician. This could be fatal. We're going to have to raise the Social Security age. I said it, and I'm still here. I didn't vaporize. It's a great video. But anyway, that is going to have to happen. And so in the 50s, you spent 8 years in retirement. Today, you spend 20-plus years in retirement. The math simply doesn't work. And so we got to gradually raise the retirement age. Another way to do it is increase the payroll tax ceiling on the wage taxes that support Social Security. Maybe reduce growth and benefits for the better off. The program was never intended to be for, frankly, all of you, right? It was intended to be for people of less means. And so that's another place where you could make some savings, is just means test it. And then you could also reduce the rate of inflation, which frankly has been being done. What about health care? Obviously a sticky subject. In the United States of America, we spend 17% of GDP on health care. In Canada, they spend 10%. In France and the United Kingdom, they spend less than that. Where they differ from us significantly on the policy side, government-supported health care, is they have budgets. So they'll budget for their health care expense in the beginning of the year. In the United States, we don't budget. We have a blank check system. And so, Kathy, you, if you were in the Medicare system, could just by yourself spend $1 billion. I know. And so we have a blank check system. You know, perhaps we need to have a budget. You know, I'm not proposing these and saying these are my ideas. I'm just telling you what's on the table. Another way to deal with Medicare, just like Social Security, is to gradually raise the retirement age. What about the tax code? It's a mess. It's very complicated. Perhaps we can restructure the tax code a little bit, make it simpler. And in fact, if what we want is more investment and less consumption, then maybe we should tax consumption, which is a VAT tax, you know, which frankly I would be for, but we'd have to offset it by eliminating capital gains taxes and lowering corporate taxes to encourage investment. But the tax code can certainly be simplified. There's a lot of talk about that. We'll see where it leads. But it's not just the private sector watchdogs. Now what we've got is we've got Paul Ryan in charge of the House Budget Committee. And Paul Ryan actually has, if you go to the website, a 100-page document that's very specific along many of these lines. And so there is a plan out there in place that I'm not saying that's the one that should be implemented, but we've come a long way. Okay, we're in the acceptance phase. And if you applied the plan as written, you would take historical spending and you would actually decrease it as a percentage of GDP over time, and you would keep government revenues essentially the same. President Obama got into the act and appointed the Simpson-Bowles Commission. They came out with some very clear thinking on how to reduce the deficit, and in fact, they're floating around the country being troubadours as well. But if you applied their principles, you would take the debt to GDP ratio, which is soaring, as you can see, up to the 200% level by 2040, and that's the CBO estimates, down to about half of, you know, where that would be over time. And so if you applied the Obama Deficit Commission's principles, you'd also get us out of this problem. And so what I am proposing is now there is hope.